just going to get cut off here. Then it's going to get cut off. That's good. That's good. Well, you can see I've got all 3 runners up on the boat at this point now, and I've already replaced that center runner. It was a piece of white oak, and it was checking too badly. I didn't like it. After I put it on there and showed you all about it, I took some time and took it back off and got rid of it, and now I've put another piece of oak that's made out of the same stock that this is made out of, and it's red oak just like the rest of it. It's great stuff for skiffs, and you can see that it's not checked on the ends and everything. It cooperates with you really nicely. Now, some of it, that center one was put on there, was kind of curved, and we pulled the curve right out of it with clamps, and I fastened it down from inside just with a few screws to hold it in position. But right now what we're going to do is put a line underneath these right here that represents the center of the chine log right here, so I can nail it down right down the middle of the center of the chine log with some spikes here afterwards. Now I'm going to go do the same exact thing on the other side. Just going to slide this one back out of position here, and this is 1.5 inches. That's 3/4 of an inch of planking plus half the chine log, 1.5 inches like that right there, and then I'll take and pull this one up right where it was here. And basically, that's it. Now we're going to move that runner over to a couple sawhorses, and we're going to get our TotalBoat spot in red over here, and one of these little small rollers and a roller pan, and we should be able to knock this thing out really quickly. Now we're going to do the edges first, so I got it stood up on one edge, and I'm taking that roller and rolling kind of diagonally because that's the easiest way to get all the paint off your roller. Just you cover more ground that way, and it's much faster. Then we're going to roll that up onto the barrows, and I don't really care if it's wet where it sits on the barrows. It doesn't spoil anything on the side of the runners. So it's sitting there, and we're going to roll the other edge. We get that one done, and we lay it down flat and roll that third side, and we're going to roll a couple coats on that kind of quickly. Now, I like red, so it looks good to me. Now it's just going to sit there and dry for a while we're working on the boat. I could put it up on the boat right now, but there really is no need to, so I'm going to let it sit there. I've got a little bottom paint left in my pan there, so I decided what I'd do is roll some of that out on the center runner there just to get a primer on that and just use some of that up. Now I'm going to head over to my port side runner up forward here, and I've got a little kit with me here, and I'd like to show you that. First off, these are the nails that I'm going to use to spike these runners down. Now they're 3.5 inch cut nails or boat nails, galvanized, and they don't measure 3.5 inches overall. They measure 3.5 inches under the head. Now that's just something that you might want to take into consideration when using these things in a position where you don't want them to be too long and sticking out the other side. You got to be kind of careful with these things. So now they're cut out or sheared out of flat stock, basically, and then they're forged a little bit up in this area, and it makes them look a little bit funny up there, and the heads are forged on, and then they're galvanized. Now, the thing that makes these things hold is a little different than people might think. People look at it and they go, well, I don't understand how that nail could hold because it's tapered, and when you pull it out, it just seemed to want to slip right out. Well, you could say that, but on the other hand, as you drive it in, it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. Now, one way, they're flat like this down in the area that does the holding, and in the other direction, they're tapered like this. So what you want to do is put that tapered part in line with the grain that you're trying to hold into, and it gets tighter and tighter, like I say, as you drive it down in the hole. Now, it works on a kind of a funny principle. It's kind of like the Chinese handcuff principle, because as you drive it in the hole, it makes the fibers of the wood tip down like this, and they get stuck alongside the nail, because when you try to pull the nail up, it actually wants to get tighter like that. See, so like I said, that's the Chinese handcuff principle. As you want to pull out, it gets tighter, see? So that's why they work at all. Now, before we drive them, we're going to have to drill holes for them, and these are the bits that we're going to use right here. We've got 3 bits here that we're going to use. And here's one of the nails right here. Now first I want to show you this bit here. Now this is a power bore bit, and it's going to drill a 1/2 inch hole for the head of the nail down into the runner. Now I'm going to drill that hole down in there quite a ways, a little bit deeper than you might think. And the reason for that is because sometimes the forward ends of the runners get all beat up, and I just don't want the head of the nail anywhere near the surface of the runner. The second bit I'm going to drive down in there is this bit right here. Now it's pretty much exactly the diameter that the nail is thick, and I wouldn't want to drill a hole any bigger than the nail so there'd be a void alongside the nail anywhere. So this is as big a bit as I can drive down in the hole. It just happens to be a tapered bit. Now it's not quite long enough, so then I'm going to use this bit right here, and I'm going to extend that hole down in there quite a ways. And the other thing is, it's a little bit smaller diameter than this bit, and the idea is that the tip of this bit drills a hole just about the size of the end of the nail. And to me that's pretty important, because the end of the nail is cut, you can see it on an angle like this. If you left the hole that you drilled tapered and very small down in here, what happens when you drive one of these nails is the end of it starts to get unwieldy once it gets past the right diameter and starts to turn on you like this, and it gets hard to drive because of that angle that it's chopped off on the end. So you want to make sure you extend your hole down in there quite a ways so that it doesn't get bent on the end down in there, and that's why we use 3 bits. Now I'm just going to put this nail back, and then I'm going to step up, and we're going to transfer this line that I had made on top of the bottom planking up on top of my runner, like that. And then I'm going to do the after side too, same sort of thing, kind of like that. And then I'm going to connect them up just with kind of a semi-straight line here with my rule and a pencil, like so. Now those holes that I'm going to drill and those nails that I'm going to drive are going to be somewhere along that line right there. Now I'm going to get myself up in position here and kneel down and take that first bit, the 1/2 inch bit for the head of the nail, and then we're going to drill 2 holes for the first 2 nail heads right there. And we have to be pretty careful how we drill the holes with this bit, because these bits will actually steer around without even tilting the drill. So be careful and line yourself up just right. Do a nice neat job. And then we're going to grab our second bit here, and that's the tapered bit, and that's pretty easy to line up with the chine log, especially that we've started in the right spot. So we're going to drive that down in both of those holes and then exchange that for the last bit. Now that's the bit that just gets all the way down to the tip of the nail. So we're going to drive it down in there. Then we're actually going to use that bit to rotate around in the top of the hole right there and clean some of the dust out of there. Now we're just going to take our nails and drive them down the hole. Now you want to put them in there in the right attitude. I want that tapered part to line up with the chine log, because the chine log is the part that's going to do the holding. So I've got that tapered part lined right up in line with that line right there. And I've got my pin maul here I'm going to drive them down there with. Now I don't want to use like a claw hammer, because you really have to bang on these when they get down in there a little deeper. You don't just want to go in voluntarily. Like that. Now we're going to take a drift and drive the head of that nail right down into the bottom of that hole. That might take a few hits here. Now you can hear it change sound when it hits the bottom of the hole, and that's all the way down and held down right tight. And believe me, these nails have some holding power. Now we're going to put the last one up forward in here, and like I said, we're using a nice heavy pin maul here. This isn't like driving them with a claw hammer or anything like that. This thing's got some weight, and it takes a little weight to drive a nail like that. There it is down flush. I'm going to pick up my drift, put it on top. Now you have to be pretty careful too, because you could miss and hit your fingers, so you have to be pretty confident that you're going to get away with it. just like that. Now I'm going to grab that runner that's been drying on the horses over there and put that up on the boat in position, and this time rather than clamping the forward end down, I'm really going to put some blocks under the after end of it and just hold it up in the air. So now it's voluntarily holding itself down up forward. It's going to be a little bit easier to drill it, and we're going to drill it and nail the forward end of that down. And then I'm going to put a board across the middle, and I'm going to put a whole bunch of lead up on top there, maybe 200 or 300 pounds actually. And then I already have a row of nails in there that tells me exactly what direction to pull this thing. Now it's a little curved, so I'm going to clamp it up against that row of nails, sight it a little bit and make sure it's straight. Once that's straight, I can go back aft, nail the 2 nails in the transom, and then I'm ready to go underneath and put a couple of nails up underneath it so that it will hold those runners straight. And then I can remove that lead weight, put that out of the way, and then I'm going to go down below and drive a few nails from down below through the bottom plank and up into the runners to hold those runners right in position. And that's about it right there. I'm not going to nail them off until I flip the boat over. Once I flip it over, I'm going to go inside and do all the nailing from inside. Now I'm going to come out from underneath the boat here and remove that lead weight and get that out of the way. And I've got some extra bottom paint in my roller pan, and I have a few dry surfaces here, so I'm going to roll those out, get a couple coats on there, use every bit of that bottom paint up because I don't want to waste a bit of it. There is one last thing for me to do here before we flip the boat over, and that is to cut off the runners on both ends. Hang over and cut off. Now we're going to cut the port side one up forward off first with the skill saw. I'm going to move over to the starboard side and start right there. You can see that I start off with a plunge cut actually because it's much easier for me to get the blade on the line of travel here, and I always cut like this. So I plunge down, then taxi along, and I make sure that I hold on to the piece so it doesn't fall and dent the side of the boat. Now I'm just going to move back aft, and I'm going to cut all 3 runners off back aft there. And I've marked them as close as I can this time, and I'm going to cut them off as close as I can this time because it's directly across grain to plane them. I can plane them, but I'd rather not plane them too much, so I'm going to cut them real nice and close. But I am going to touch up that center runner a little bit with the electric plane because it didn't quite cut off as flush as I'd like it to. We're going to take the planer up forward now and just finish off whatever's left hanging over up forward, just 1/4 of an inch or so. And I'm using the boat really to guide this cut with the planer. I've got the heel end of the planer kind of skidding across the boat there, and the planer's pointing uphill when I do it. Very simple to do. Now the other side's even easier because I'm planing into the grain, and the planer just cooperates better planing into the grain, pulls right down into it. So it's faster and easier, it comes out just as smooth no matter which direction you go, as long as the planer's nice and sharp. Now I'm just going to take a handsaw to the forward end of these runners, that very pointy part I don't want on there. And I'm starting on the port side here, and I'm just going to cut it off really on an arbitrary angle and width. You know, I have nothing, no line to follow or anything, just whip it right off there. And then what I'll do is take that piece that I've cut off and bring it over to the other side and kind of use it for a guide for my angle, but I really wouldn't even have to do that. All I'd really have to do is just take a peek across the boat at the other side and cut it off exactly the same way. You'll notice that there's a raw edge there where I've cut that with the skill saw, and even where I've cut it with a handsaw. So we don't want to leave that like that. So I'm going to take a little block plane and knock that off on a 45-degree angle. Now that block plane's pretty sharp, and I don't have it set in there very deep. I don't mind how many strokes it takes to do it. I just don't want the plane to be digging in or fetching up when I plane. So I adjust it very, very lightly and just go over it real quickly. I'm going to plane up at the stem head and even go back aft and knock those off back aft as well. Now I've got a very sharp chisel here, and I'm trimming at the vertical corners where I couldn't get at it with a plane because I want those trimmed right down to the boat there. And you got to be pretty careful because you don't want to stab that chisel into the boat when you're doing this. I'm just going to knock them off like the same as the other corners on a 45-degree angle. And that's not quite what I want. I'm going to have to pick up a piece of sandpaper after that, kind of a rough piece, and sand away at those corners all the way around there a little bit. Get them nice and rounded off because I don't want any crispy corners there because it doesn't really hold paint really well. So you get that rounded up really nicely, and then it'll hold paint really, really well. So now we just finished up sanding the ends of the cuts here, and I'm dusting the boat off real nice. I want to make sure that there's no dust on the boat here when I roll it over, because the dust could slide down and get trapped under the runners. The bottom planking is not tightly banged up or tightly nailed up against the runners at this point. I've only got a couple of little fastenings inside there just holding them in place. And this unevenness that you see right here and we've been looking at all along, I can't address that from this side, because when I try to pound on the planking to even it up, it's on a curve like this. So what happens is it just keeps getting tighter to each other and it doesn't want to move. But when I do roll it over, I'll be able to tap on that planking from inside and it'll bear right up against the runner. So I want to make sure we don't have any dust getting trapped under the runners. And you'll also notice that I've removed a whole bunch of the bracing that braced the frames down to the floor, because I'm not going to climb all over it anymore and I'm not going to really do much work on it right now. So I just want it resting on 3 points right now, the stem head and 2 points at the transom, and that's it. I want to show you one more thing here before we flip it over. I just put some C-clamps on the frames right here, and you see they stick out past the planking right here. And the reason why I did it is because when we roll it over, I just don't want the planking right here to touch the floor. And we have to protect this part of the boat as well, but this part's kind of important because I got one more plank to put on there. That's going to be an exposed seam right there, and I can't chew that all up. We've been trying to protect it as we work on the boat, and this is just part of that. Now this is the moment I've been waiting for, to get the boat right side up, or upside right, or whatever you want to call it. Now, I've got a little crew from next door, my buddies from next door, the strong men, and we're just going to pick it up physically and carry it over to one side and set it down. And now we're going to roll it up onto one side and then let it sit there for a second and put some pads under where the bottom planking might touch the floor. Now we're just going to carry it over a little bit more and set it down again, and then just lay it right down on its bottom. Then we're going to pick up the bow end and block it up a little bit, and then we're going to block up the stern end and get the boat up a little bit closer to eye level, and then the crew can disappear. Well, there it is, right side up, and it's been enjoyable so far. Look at it. Boy, it looks fantastic to me. I mean, there's some things that don't look just right, like all the frames are all wild here and they have to be cut down and the shear has to be established yet. I don't even know where the shear is going to be. Isn't that something? That's just like a design as you go kind of thing, and that's the way skiffs were built. Some people want them a little higher, a little lower, so we're going to go into that. That's going to be one of our next videos, but just to look it over like this, pretty nice. I'm going to walk around it here and just reminisce a little bit about skiffs, I think, because skiffs were really fun for me when I was a kid. Everybody had a skiff that I knew when I was a kid, and they were a lot like this. And some of them were a lot more rickety than this one, but this is a great looking skiff so far here. You know, it's 17 feet long, and I just remember my father being involved with boats like this. He was a tonger. He used to tong up here with the big tongs, like a big giant pair of scissors, you know, and he was a commercial fisherman, and he had quite a few of these things. And today, people bull rake more than tong. They be bull raking from here. And it's great for both. Scalloping, man, you can do anything with this thing. You can go water skiing, fishing, go outside in the rough water. Even though they pound a lot, they're capable in the sea. You know, you're safe in a skiff like this, and I think maybe with 40 to 60 horsepower on it, this thing ought to be a ball. And I just can't wait to get it done myself and get it in the water, because this is just going to be fantastic. There's some stuff to do yet, you know. Like I say, the whole shear, I got to clean it up inside and take all the polysulfide out of it and clean it up and even the bottom planking and nail it down to the runners, all the bottom planking here. But it's kind of a labor of love, so I'm happy to do it. I hope everybody's happy to see it, because it is fun.